reference to this particular podcast, had run into a couple of technical difficulties here, but should be live here through the Boxing Swords podcast and everything like that. Hopefully, everyone is all good here for this pretty much this first week of 2026. We got a few things here that we're going to be talking about in this particular podcast. Had to kind of like look at what's going on as far as like this upcoming week. We should have, this fight card coming up scheduled for the Barclays Center. That should be here with the headlining bout being the WBC super lightweight title bout between Subriel Matias and Dalton Smith. Now, we had a number of things in reference to this particular bout. One, given the story that happened a couple of weeks ago when it came to Subriel Matias, right? And the thing with that is that, hey, we thought Subriel Matias would have been in some trouble when it came to what was going down with the test results that came out. But apparently that wasn't enough for this particular bout to not take place for Saturday. This is different than what we had happen with Janibek Almohammed, who was supposed to be facing Arislan De Lara for the WBO, IBF, and WBA middleweight championships. They scrapped, Janibek from that fight completely. So that's why you had Arislan De Lara face Johan Gonzalez. But this one, well, you got Subriel Matias, and I guess, the sample was like a small sample there for him to continue to be eligible to compete. And the WBC had a resolution in reference to that. It said that, okay, we'll be able to fight, but you still have to, you have to honor your mandatory challenges, coming down the line. First here with the Dalton Smith, and then the next one that's coming up. But also you're going to be under some stringent testing here for the rest of the year. I don't know why you can't necessarily have like a 24/7 365 type of thing there with Subriel Matias. But the thing about it is that, hey, they're gonna have him go through these particular tests, and it is what it is on that front. Now the thing is, I wanted to see if I could pull up something when it came to the WBC's decision, with that. But I wanted to find out if I'd be able to get that, because I just found that to be really interesting, given that you have the WBC with the clean boxing program that is, applied to the world champions and those that are in the top 15. So if you're going to have all of these fighters be participating within the world boxing program, then you gotta be able to have it to the point where, hey, the champion gotta adhere to those rules and everything like that. But it looks like what's going on here with this is they made the decision that you're going to have Subriel Matias still fight Dalton Smith over at the Barclays Center and defend a WBC belt. The whole thing with WBC or the New York State Athletic Commission, they say, hey, it's not enough to where he could test positive on that front. You know what I mean? So that's what you got on that instance, right? Now, with that being said, I have to see like how Subriel Matias reacts to this in reference to his bout against Dalton Smith. You have Dalton Smith there, of course, who is the mandatory challenger, or stands as the mandatory challenger here for that WBC belt. And this is he's going to be his first opportunity there for the world title. There, Dalton Smith. He has that record of 18 wins and no losses, with 13 wins by way of knockout coming from the United Kingdom. And his last bout was against Matthew Germain over in Sheffield, but we had like a decision win on that. And he's had wins over Jose Zepeda and a number of guys that are basically based in the UK. But you're going up against Subriel Matias that had one of the highest knockout ratios there within the super lightweight division. You know what I mean? So it's like, how are you going to be able to react to, that type of stuff there going on or going down when you have Subriel Matias there? Shout out to Z Pacino there in the building, man. What's good with you? Checking in and everything like that. You feel me? So that being said, man, you got Subriel Matias there, like I was mentioning there, has a record of 23 wins and 2 losses, right? Was coming off of his win against Alberto Puello to get that world championship. And I was mentioning it there on Wednesday, as far as like him getting that win in that ring event over at Louis Armstrong Stadium in Queens, New York. And it was, a close fight, but you're there with Alberto Puello. Alberto Puello always has those close fights. He had them in the previous fights that he had against, Sandro Martin and Gary Antoine Russell, so this was like another one. It was just that 2 judges felt like Subriel Matias won most of the rounds. So that's why he ended up getting that decision over Alberto Puello. And then after that, they said, hey, you're going to be fighting a mandatory challenger there in Dalton Smith. Eventually got this to happen, and that's what we got. So you got here with Subriel Matias there, as I said, 23 wins, 2 losses, 22 of those 23 wins by way of knockout at a height of 5'8" with a reach of 71. And with Dalton Smith, I mentioned his undefeated record. He's there at 5'9". Doesn't necessarily, show the reach there for Dalton Smith, but you got that, of course, that activity there with Subriel Matias. Just keep throwing punches, just keep throwing punches. As long as you don't have anything that gets his respect, he's just going to continue to move forward and try to walk you down, pin you down, and get you to either just wilt under his pressure or whatever. You know what I mean? Even in the fight there against Subriel Matias had a point where he was, doing pretty well as far as like outboxing him, but it was just that the constant pressure and following Puello around, Puello got, a little bit tired there in the back half of the fight, and that's where you had Subriel Matias getting the upper hand here. So, here for Dalton Smith, it's his biggest fight of his career, but is it going to be to the point where Dalton Smith has something to like make Subriel Matias respect him? I know that Matias has had, that bout where he did lose the IBF version of the super lightweight title, when he had it against Liam Paro in 2024, right? And he got, outpointed, and it was like a little bit of a sloppy fight of sorts there, but Paro was able to outpoint him to a decision from that. But since then, you've seen Subriel Matias, get those couple of wins in Puerto Rico, then defeat Alberto Puello to be the WBC super lightweight champion. And so now this is his first defense of that title against Dalton Smith. That's going to be on ppv.com, man. It's going to be on ppv.com. And just being real with y'all, I say, hey, y'all check it out on ppv.com. Y'all would think that maybe I would, make the trip over to Brooklyn for that, but I got things that I got set up for this month and the following month, so won't be able to make this one here for this card that they got. Now, this is a headlining bout for a Fresh Productions fight card, and just being straight up with y'all, yo. Just being straight up with y'all. Hey, hopefully y'all check the thing with the tickets, man, because tickets, hey, I don't know if they moving or whatever, but last time I checked a few days ago, tickets, yeah, it wasn't looking pretty good. Just being real with you, it wasn't looking pretty good, and maybe that's kind of something that is attributed to what you got for the promotional company or whatever. But from what I've been hearing from folks around the boxing circles, it's like, hey, I ain't really hear much about this event. I ain't really hear much about these promotional companies kind of like pushing this stuff or whatever it is, and that's why you have what you have as far as like the I guess the gate, so to speak, right? So it's like now they got to have this final push here as it is fight week 4, this world title bout between Subriel Matias and Dalton Smith. I mean, some people may have said, hey, maybe they should have had this thing hosted over in the UK or something. But remember, this thing went up for purse bid, and Fresh Productions ended up winning the purse bid. So that kind of like says, hey, there you go. You know what I mean? Um, but you do, have the whole thing with the fight card. As I was mentioning there, with that being the headlining bout, Subriel Matias versus Dalton Smith. You got Emmanuel Rodriguez versus Fernando Diaz on the card. Alfredo Santiago versus Henry Cedeno on the card. Javier Centron versus Jonathan Rodriguez on this card. Nestor Bravo versus Pedro Campa. You're also going to have Keith Colon there against Alberto Guevara, which is going to be pretty interesting there with Keith Colon, being there at 8-0 currently, going up against Alberto Guevara, who has a record of 28 wins and 8 losses there. So that's going to be something to see where Keith Colon is at this point of his pro career. And you also got like a Arjun Aseni versus Mario Orozco that's on this card. Once again, it's going to be on ppv.com, right? There at the Barclays Center, right? But, for me, the thing here with this Subriel Matias and Dalton Smith is like, well, how does this, kind of factor in the landscape of the super lightweight division, right? You got the thing there when it comes to Subriel Matias, as I mentioned, former IBF champion, now current WBC champion. Okay, he had been looking for those fights as far as like unifying and all that type of stuff when he was an IBF champion. Didn't necessarily get it. Then when he lost to Leon Paro, he tried to get on his way back to becoming a world champion again. Got that opportunity against Alberto Puello, and now he's like, okay, after he gets this defense, which is a mandatory defense, if he ends up winning it, then he would have that open chance to unify or go after one of the world champions that's out there, right? So for Subriel Matias, if he gets a win here against Dalton Smith, he could go after those guys that currently have a world championship, there with, like a Gary Antoine Russell, who has the WBA title right now. You got the thing here with, of course, Teofimo Lopez that has his upcoming bout against Shakur Stevenson. So we got to see what happens with that at the end of the month there or for January 31st, right? And then, you have the whole situation there with the IBF champion there, Richard Hitchens, who was supposed to be fighting on January 31st, but is not necessarily happening. And they said they have another fight for him lined up. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know, like, if it's a fight against the number 1 ranked contender or not. But outside of that, I don't know where Richard Hitchens is going to go from this point, because he was supposed to be fighting Jermaine Ortiz. Now it's Keyshawn Davis that's fighting Jermaine Ortiz. So now with Richard Hitchens, what's going to be out there? I don't know if Keith Conley said that they had something lined up for him or whatever, but he said it might be a better situation for him. Well, let's see. If he's ended up getting a little bit more for having this fight, whatever came up for him, then going up against Jermaine Ortiz, more power to him. But if it's not something where it's a unification bout, which I doubt that it's going to be, then I don't know where it's going to get to at this point for it. All right. So, with that being said, that's what you have as far as like the whole situation there with the super lightweight division. Like I said here with this Subriel Matias versus Dalton Smith, I mean, it's supposed to be a fight between two guys that are within the top 10 of the super lightweight division. Now, if it's like that, you would think that there would be a good amount of buzz. But, like I was saying here a few minutes ago, ain't looking like it's too much buzz on that thing there. You know what I'm saying? So that's what you have there on that front, right? And I mentioned the whole thing in reference to the undercard, right? You got your NABO super lightweight title there, and Alfredo Santiago versus Henry Cedeño. So you got that also happening there in the super lightweight division, man. And man, I would say like this one, I don't know how far the winner would get to the super lightweight rankings with a win, but you got there with Alfredo Santiago. I think he is rated at number 2 or something like that. You know what I mean? So if you got him kind of like rated at number 2 in the WBO rankings, then a win here, would kind of like get him to be like, okay, maybe I get that spot to be next in line pretty soon or whatever it is. But we'll see. I kind of like look at it as this. If you got, Alfredo Santiago getting this win, he's going to wait it out to see what happens on January 31st, because not only with the main event, but also the co-feature bout there with Keyshawn Davis versus Jermaine Ortiz, because you have Keyshawn Davis that's currently rated at number 1 in the WBO rankings right now. You feel me? So, hey, if he gets his win and hands us Daniel his first professional loss, then that's gonna, make him really look for trying to get a shot at a world championship, particularly there within the WBO rankings. But also Henry Cedeño does have a case himself, as currently ranked at number 10 in the WBO. So that's what you got there on that front. You feel me? All right. So with that being said, right, what else is on the scene here for that particular card? I mentioned the thing there with Keith Colon, of course, from New Jersey, based in New Jersey, that's going to be on that fight card. You got Emmanuel Rodriguez that's also there. He's coming off of a loss there to Ryosuke Nishida that was last May, right? So he's trying to get back in the scene there within that 118-pound division or whatever it is, after losing to Nishida over in Japan. So this one here is to try to get him back in the win column there against Fernando Diaz, right? What else is there, man? Because you got like Pedro Campa, this in a fight against Nestor Bravo. Bravo is trying to get back in the win column. He had lost in his last bout there to Indongini over in Fajardo, Puerto Rico. So you got a number of fighters that are on this card. It's pretty much like, based for a number of Puerto Rican fighters on this thing here. But, that is something there that, we try to see what these fighters can do, either trying to get back in the win column or within the main event. You got, the WBC Super Lightweight Championship on the line there with Subriel Matias. As I said, he wants to get in the mix with those top fighters within 140 pounds. I know that you have the whole situation with the WBC Interim Championship, as you did have Isaac Pitbull Cruz have this fight in December against Lamont Rose Jr., where it ended up being a draw. That wasn't no draw, man. That wasn't a draw. Y'all know that. But with that being said, now you got it to the point where Subriel Matias has this fight. Then he would go up against Alberto Puello. That's what they're looking at. Or that's what the plan was, for the WBC at that point. But I found that to be pretty interesting, because you're going to already have a plan in place for the winner of Subriel Matias versus Dalton Smith, while you still have an interim champion there within 140-pound division in Isaac Cruz. So I'm like, how does all of that work out? How does all of that work out, where you're going to have the world champion, you got a mandatory challenger, you got an interim champion, and then you could have like a couple of other fighters or something like that be within contention there for that WBC belt, all at the same time, while Subriel Matias wants to unify. So, man, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to have all of that work out. Don't know how they're going to have that work out. You feel me? But with that being said, that kind of like is the whole gist of what's going down there for January 10th in Brooklyn, right? So you got that Barclays Center in Brooklyn. There was Subriel Matias and Dalton Smith headlining that fight card there, and it's going to be on ppv.com, right? All right. So, with that being said, you also have another bout that's going to be on for January 10th, and this is going to be over in Germany. You do have the WBC Interim Heavyweight Championship on the line. Agi Cabello, 26-0 versus Damian Neba. They're at 17-0. I was mentioning a few days ago that I've been to a number of fights that Damian Neba has had. His last bout against Joey DeWisco, I was talking about that. That was at the Barclays Center. And yeah, he was like outputting DeWisco, for a good amount of that fight. But, if you're a guy that's supposed to be climbing up the rankings in the heavyweight division, you got to be able to have that next gear. And yeah, DeWisco is, a veteran in the game, had over 40 professional fights and things like that. But, given where they're trying to have someone like Damian Neba, you got to be able to get this guy out of there. Was it a stoppage? Did it end up being a stoppage? Yes. But it did take him, some time in order to, get that far. That's a good question. That is a good question there from Bull Rider. Is Pitbull Cruz considered a gatekeeper? Well, by definition, no, because the thing with Pitbull Cruz is he's won a few fights. He's had a draw. Of course, he had a draw in his last fight against Lamar Roach Jr. And usually to kind of like be considered a gatekeeper, you would have to have it to where you've lost a couple of fights at that top level, and you kind of like say that, all right, he can't necessarily compete at the top level anymore. So what do we do with them? Do we put him up against a rising contender and see if he could, defeat a rising contender? If he gets to that particular point, then you could consider Pitbull Cruz there as a gatekeeper. But outside of that, I wouldn't necessarily, view him as that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like how I you'll respond to that question in reference to Pitbull Cruz, because remember, he's still there as a WBC interim champion at 140 pounds. Now, given that situation, do we see him potentially having a rematch against Lamar Roach Jr. Later in the year? Pretty much like what I would say May or June, maybe. But the thing about it is that, okay, if you're going to have Isaac Cruz there against Lamont Roach Jr., will they have him to the point where he could eventually face the WBC champion by the end of this year? I don't know. It's like I said, that first bout or initial bout, Lamont Roach won that. So are they going to be inclined to have another fight with Lamont Roach Jr.? I don't know. We probably have to ask Sean Gibbons if he's up for having his fighter going up against Lamont Roach Jr. there again. We got to see if that's going to happen. You feel me? But that's kind of like the whole situation there at 140 pounds, because you got, like I said, Subriel Matias having this fight coming up against Dalton Smith. I talked about the thing there with the WBC interim champion there in Isaac Cruz. You got the whole thing with Richard Hitchens that was supposed to be fighting at the end of January there against Jermaine Ortiz, but that ain't happening. You got the thing here with Gary Antoine Russell, who, was rumored to be getting in the ring in March. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that. I'll follow up, see if they got anything in reference to that, but he was supposed to have his mandatory defense in November. Didn't happen, so that's what he got on that front. You feel me? Outside of that, I would say that, with Matias, I kind of like favor him against Dalton Smith. I don't know if it's by a considerable margin. I usually check out the odds for these fights that are coming up. They got the thing. They're actually very, very close on the odds, which is kind of surprising to me that they got it at minus 150 for Subriel Matias and plus 120 for Dalton Smith. Wow. Actually, that's surprising to me because you would have someone like a Dalton Smith that, like I said, ain't really, been in the big stage or anything like that, going up against a two-time champion here in the super lightweight division. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to boxing coach here, also saying that, hey, Pitbull and Roach both beat Tank, in my opinion. Whoa. So, and there you go. I mean, and both of those guys are competing at 140 now. We had the thing with Tank Davis. There's been some buzz about Tank Davis, potentially coming back in the ring here for 2026. And, even though I said the thing in reference to a potential rematch between Pitbull Cruz and Lamont Rhodes Jr., there's anybody that I want to have Lamont Rhodes Jr. fight in 2026, you got to be against Tank Davis there. We got to have that rematch. Feel me? Got to have that rematch there. You know what I mean? Because what happened on March 1st, everybody was really like clamoring for an immediate rematch. And then there was talk about an immediate rematch. And then the whole thing, with Jake Paul happened. And then it didn't happen. So now, what do we got? just being real with you. But that's kind of like that whole situation there too within the 140-pound division. So I know some people are gonna try to see if they can tune in for what happens with the WBC super lightweight title fight between Subriel Matias and Dalton Smith, and then after that, kind of like get a little bit more of an idea of where the super lightweight division will be going by the end of the month because of the fights that are coming up on or at Madison Square Garden. Feel me? He said in reference to Tank's fights with Pitbull and Roach there, shout out the thing there with the boxing coach. He says that they had both fights at 7-5. They're saying that Tank won 5 rounds against both Pitbull and Lamar Roach. But very close fights, either way. And he said that Tank's biggest problem is his punch output or his lack of, activity. That's the thing a lot of times with Tank. I mean, yeah, he could be precise or try to be, economical with his punch output and try to, make the most out of it. But at the same time, does that mean that you end up giving rounds away because of your lack of activity? So, if it goes to full 12, and if you're not, making everything count, with the punches that you do have, that could, lead to some problems right there. You know what I mean? So that's what you got on that front. All right. So kind of like, went through most of those fights that are going to be at the Barclays Center. And I did mention there over in Germany, you're going to have Agit Cabello versus Damian Neba for the WBC interim heavyweight title. There with Cabello, who has been one of the more impressive fighters within the heavyweight division over the past couple of years. He pretty much like got on the scene there with his win over Arslanbek Makhmudov, stopping him, within 4 rounds. After he did that, folks was like, whoa, he stopped Arslanbek. Like, wow. So then he gets in the ring there against Frank Sanchez in his next fight, who was another undefeated fighter at the time that, gave a lot of his opponents problems with his fighting style, of course, Cuban fighting style and all of that. And guess what? Cabello was able to get the, KO over him. Yeah, you had the whole thing with Frank Sanchez and his, condition going into the bout, but, still you get in there, you handle business regardless of what your opponent is going through. So that's what, Agit Cabello was able to do on that. And then last year against Zhilei Zhang for the WBC interim belt, he was able to get a stoppage win over Zhilei Zhang. Yeah. So you had Zhilei Zhang, of course, who had his win over Deontay Wilder in 2024, but then up against Cabello, he ended up getting, stopped or, knocked down, even though Cabello was, down in that fight too, So, shout out to Agit Cabello. He's been able to handle business here since 2023. Now going up against Damian Neba, and as I was mentioning, Damian Neba was coming up the rankings there within the heavyweight division, had a couple of fights under some top ranked cards and things like that. But in his last bout, as I mentioned, there that he had against Joey DeResco, I was like, hey, if you trying to make moves and get up there in the heavyweight division, you gotta take care of business, particularly in the heavyweight division. So even though we got the stoppage victory, I was like, okay, maybe they're gonna continue to slowly keep him busy and that type of stuff. But nope, it wasn't but a few days after, probably like not even a week after he had that win over Joey DeResco, that they had him lined up to face Age Cabello here for Germany. So it's like for Cabello, it could be like a stay busy fight. He does want to fight for the full title there with Alexander Usyk, but it looks like there's going to be some plans for Alexander Usyk, hopefully within what I would say 4 months or so there. So as of right now, Age Cabello can't really get a shot at Alexander Usyk. So for the time being, they got him busy. They got him over there in his home in Germany there with a fight against Damian Neba. So undefeated versus undefeated on that fight card there in Germany there for the WBC interim heavyweight championship. And you're going to have another interim championship there on the line as well with Yadir Herrera versus Ricardo Nunez. Like, come on, man. What are we doing with all of these interim championships, man? You got Nunez there that's ranked at number 1. You got Yadir Herrera is there ranked at number 3. Now, the thing about this is with these two fighters, the winner would be at the time the interim champion, but there could be a slight chance that they could end up being the full champion there in the lightweight division, WBC lightweight champion. Why? Because of Shakur Stevenson facing Teofimo Lopez for the WBO and Ring Magazine super lightweight titles. You know what I mean? Yeah, too many championships, man. Yeah, there's too many championships there, coach. Feel me? Yeah, I got this thing like, got like dual channels here on a thing for YouTube and Rumble and stuff like that. So you can check us out, multiple platforms, and we're available audio form, through, Spotify too. So, hey, shout out to everyone that's, listening in right now here live and chiming in on the live chat and that type of stuff here. Shout out to my guy Z Pacino on the chat, says he likes how Cabello got right back to the game plan after the knockdown against Zhilei Zhang. Hey, listen, with Zhilei Zhang, it's almost like a war of attrition. If you're able to get past 6 to 7 rounds with him, you could get him at the back part of the back half of the fight. You feel me? So for Cabello, as long as he just kept with it and just stuck with the activity and everything like that, he was able to wear down Zhilei Zhang in that fight. So we got to see if he's going to be able to do this again here against Damian Neba, who like I said, I mean, he's there at 6'7" with a reach of 86. He's at 29 years old from Poland. Of course, they try to build him up over in New York or Newark and all of that type of stuff. But outside of that, I would say that he ready for this opportunity this fast? I don't know. I don't know. Like, you're already having someone there in Damian Neba who isn't, at least right now, isn't ranked in the WBC. So it's like, come on, y'all putting him in there against Age Cabello. Yeah, it's like as they say, for some on Cabello's side, it could be a stay busy fight, but at the same time, like, you gotta be able to properly build up your fighter, because if it's something here where, like for Damian Neba, yeah, it's the opportunity of a lifetime for him. But at the same time, if he ends up losing bad, how would that affect him for the rest of his professional career? That's what we got to see here coming up on January 10th over in Germany, with that being the headlining bout, right? And I also, mentioned a thing there as far as like another interim title there within the lightweight division that's going to be on there. That's crazy to have that fight, Yadi Herrera versus Ricardo Nunez over in Germany. But it's something, man. It's something. You're gonna have um, Bob Arum, Spencer Brown, and Frank Warren will have fighters involved in this fight card in Germany. Okay, but it's basically for Ake Kabayel being able to fight there in his home country, there in Germany. That he hasn't. We had that string of wins that I talked about over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and so this is like his first fight back in Germany since having those wins against Makhmudov, Frank Sanchez, and Zalei Zhang. All right, so that's what you had on that front. So kind of like see that whole schedule there that's going on. It says you would like to see Zalei Zhang versus Fabio Wardley. Good one there from Boxing Coach on this chat. You probably could see Zalei Zhang versus Fabio Wardley. That could possibly happen. You got Fabio Wardley, who is now the full-fledged WBO champion. But Zalei Zhang is ranked at number 3 in the WBO. So, hey, maybe you could have something like that. But at the same time, you might also have like Wardley defend that title against Filip Hrgović. One of those two. Maybe that could be the route there on that front. So we'll see. But that's a good suggestion. That's a good suggestion there. I mean, shout out to Dante's Boxing Talk. He says we got that local card in Portsmouth, Virginia on January 9th there. And Jerry Forrest is going to be back there on that, of course, from the area. So shout out to Jerry Forrest there, the heavyweight. Y'all know about the heavyweight there, Jerry Forrest. So he's going to be on this fight card that's coming up in Portsmouth, Virginia on January 9th. Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to make the drive down there for that, but I mean, we'll see. You know what I mean? But that's like, one that, hey, shout out to Dante on that to, kind of like let us know about the fight card on January 9th over in Portsmouth, Virginia. You feel me? All right. So, talk about those two fight cards there that's coming up for January 10th. Now, you do have the whole thing there for January 31st, as I mentioned, with Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson for the WBO and Ring Magazine super lightweight titles, headlining that fight card in Madison Square Garden. I mean, this is going to be a really, really intriguing bout. I do have both Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez included in the Boxing Source pound for pound top 16. Okay. You're going to have Shakur Stevenson going for a world title in his 4th weight class. So he's been the WBO featherweight champion. He's been the unified champion at super featherweight. He's been the WBC lightweight champion, or he currently has the WBC lightweight championship. Now, he could try to go for another title within the super lightweight division against Teofimo Lopez. All right. We saw his performance against William Zepeda over at Louis Armstrong Stadium in Queens, New York last year. One judge scored it 10 rounds to 2. I said that bout was a 10-2 Shakur Stevenson fight from the get-go. I didn't think that William Zepeda was going to be doing much there to kind of like really nullify what Shakur Stevenson could do. And in those first 5 or 6 rounds, you've probably seen the best of Shakur Stevenson that we've seen probably since his bout against, I don't know, like not even like a what is it, like a Shuichiro Yoshino. It wasn't even like that. Maybe it was probably like he was against Jamel Herring. That's probably how he looked there against William Zepeda, was like his bout against Jamel Herring over in Atlanta. You know what I mean? He said he had it 11 rounds to 1 for Shakur Stevenson. Hey, I could see that too. Like I said, I mean, I ain't really seen much there from William Zepeda over the course of those 12 rounds. It really said that he kind of like won any of those any round, so to speak, like that. I mean, not clearly, but given what was happening in the back half of the fight, Shakur kind of toned down his activity level and things like that then maybe you could give 1 or 2 rounds for Williams Zepeda. But outside of that, Shakur Stevenson kind of like dominated that. But now he's going up against Teofimo Lopez, who, of course, has been the unified, again, I'm going to say it again, unified champion at 135 pounds, and then going up to 140 to defeat Josh Taylor to become the WBO and lineal champion at 140 pounds. Okay. We've seen his bouts against Jermaine Ortiz. We've seen his bouts against Steve Claggett. We've seen his bout against who was it at the time, the mandatory challenger there, when he won the mandatory defense of the WBO title against Arnold Barbosa Jr., right? That was at that Times Square thing and all that type of stuff, right? Some people thought that he would have ended up fighting someone like a Devin Haney after that. Nope. He would have fought like a Boots Ennis. He was bringing up Boots Ennis' name after his win over Barbosa. No. Come on, man. No. So now he's in this position here going up against Shakur Stevenson, and this is something where it's like, all right, are we going to see the Teofimo Lopez that we saw against, like, say, for example, Vasily Lomachenko, or I don't know, man, like maybe against a Josh Taylor, or, maybe like how he ended up having that great start and ended up finishing Richard Coleman, right, for that knockout victory there? Or are we going to see something closer to a George Kambosos fight or the Sandor Martin fight? We don't know when it comes to Teofimo Lopez, because like it's like, from what we've seen in the career of Teofimo Lopez, the absolute best for Teofimo Lopez is to where it's like, okay, you get like a decision win and that type of stuff. Or is it to the point where it's like he has that moment against Sandor Martin? Do I still got it? I don't know. But here against Shakur Stevenson, we got to see how that goes. It said, the boxing coach here on the chat on one channel here says, Teo and Shakur is a very stylistically bad matchup for both fighters. Neither fighter is going to look good. And listen, man. Listen here, man. Okay. I'm here to promote the fight. I am here, once again, I am here to promote the fight. Yeah, I could be straight up with you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we could have something where, I talked about the Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin fight, or the Teofimo Lopez versus the Jermaine Ortiz fight, right? Where, oh man, hey, and I was there for the Teofimo versus Sandor Martin fight. Man, that was a struggle. Okay, that was a struggle to go through those 12 rounds. All right, just being real with you, it was a struggle to go through those 12 rounds. All right, but hey, you also had at the same token Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos. I ain't go to that fight. I could have went to that fight. I ain't go to that fight, and y'all all know what happened in that fight. Okay, so and given the styles from both of these guys, yeah. You could have something where you might see that happen when it comes to styles, and this being the main event, and after a few rounds, it could be like, ooh, I don't know, because you got like a counter puncher and Teofimo Lopez. You got a guy that just moves a lot and is very economical in his offense, in Shakur Stevenson. Yeah. I don't know, man. Shout out to Hunter Gray, man. Another chat here, man. He says that Teo is going to smash Shakur Stevenson. That Teo fights at the level of his competition. Shakur has not had the same type of competition Teo has faced. Okay. You had the thing, Shakur Stevenson has had a couple of fights, like his unification bout, against Oscar Valdez. He's had, bouts against, Ropes and Conceição. What else is there? I talked about his last bout against William Zepeda, right? Josh Padley had that stoppage win over Josh Padley. talked about the Edwin De Los Santos. I talked about the Shushiro Yoshino. I talked about, the Jamel Herring fight too. But, he hasn't had those bouts to that level of, like, say, I mentioned there with Teofimo Lopez going up against a Vasyl Lomachenko or against a Josh Taylor, who was a former undisputed champion there at 140 pounds before facing Teofimo Lopez. So yeah, you do have that on that front. You feel me? Shout out to Leon Robinson here in the building, man. Hey, salute to you, bro. He says that Shakur was the worst possible matchup for Teo. He thinks that Sandor Martin got him, but Sandor does nothing better than Shakur. He says it's gonna be bad. Hey, listen, man. I mean, I was mentioning that whole thing with the Sandor Martin fight. He scored a knockdown against Teofimo Lopez. Some people thought that he scored 2, but it wasn't scored as 2, right? And it ended up being that split decision for Teofimo Lopez. But yeah, man, it was a good. He is not. He went through it for those 12 rounds, and that's why I was mentioning there. Do I still got it? Remember that quote from Teofimo Lopez? And it was crazy too, because even after all of that and that performance, you know how sometimes you have a post-fight press conference and everything like that. Teofimo Lopez wasn't even there. He wasn't there. Nope. You had the thing where it was Jared Anderson. You had Keyshawn Davis. What was on that card? I think it was Xander Zayas or something like that. But Teofimo Lopez, nope. Zach here, shout out to Zach. He says, man, that Shakur Stevenson is not it. Oh man, he said Shakur Stevenson is not it. But yeah. But y'all hit the like button. Thanks for supporting here. Hit the like button here. As we chop it up here for the Boxing Source podcast, man. Now I did have some technical difficulties going into the start of this thing, because I wanted to have the whole clip and try to fire up the clip for Tim Bradley, who recently posted up on his channel some comments about Shakur Stevenson. You know what I mean? He said, "Hey man," he was like, "Hey man, Shakur, man, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I seen you. I seen you in camp, and I don't know what's going on with them hands. You might need somebody, to wrap them hands better. I know you say you had problems with them hands. So, and I'm looking at you, and you can't be playing around with Teofimo Lopez or something like that, right?" And I was like, yo, I'm thinking that Tim Bradley might have some doubts there when it comes to Shakur Stevenson going up against Teofimo Lopez, because if you having this type of a pep talk on your channel about Shakur Stevenson, and I mean, we see Shakur Stevenson, he has his channel, YouTube channel, they're like being in camp, and he's been out there. He did some things with Jake Paul at one point, and now he's getting prepared for this upcoming bout against Teofimo Lopez here. And like Tim Bradley was saying, he's like, "Hey man, I know that you was out there, with Terrence Crawford and Bomac, and after that camp, you look real bad. So I don't know how you gonna approach this bout." Man, I don't know what was going on with Tim Bradley, but he has those type of shock value type of videos that he has on his channel. But as someone was saying there with the style matchups, man, yeah, it's gonna be something there with the style matchup. Like I said, it's almost like you got 2 counter punches that are gonna be in the ring, pretty much on the like you say, on paper or the tail of the tape. You're gonna have 2 counter punchers going up against each other. So it's gonna be like, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first. Nah. We can't have that. Yeah, my guy Leon here in the building, man. Salute, man, for you checking in. So just like he did with Devin Haney, Bradley's opinions need a lot of salt. He need a lot of salt, and sometimes he is salty with some of these things here. But hey, it is what it is with Tim Bradley, and that's how he's able to get the following that he does have on his channel, and being a commentator on when they had Top Rank, when it was Top Rank on ESPN. But we don't know what Top Rank is going to be at for 2026, at least not yet. That's why you're seeing a number of their fighters on these other cards. And it's been like that ever since, last July. You've seen, like, for example, you see what's going on here with Teofimo Lopez. You see there what's going on with Keyshawn Davis. You got what's going on over in Puerto Rico for January 31st. A number of those fighters that are on that card in Puerto Rico are pretty much like, from Top Rank. But as far as like a TV deal for them, yeah, I'm not, getting any update on that as of yet, and, for people, there's like, reporters and columnists that, ask around and things like that. For me, I'm like hands off from that. There's comments, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm not even touching it. You know what I'm saying? The boxing coach or this other chat says that Shakur is hanging out with Jake Paul. I hope he gets knocked out. Oh man, come on, man. Oh man. I don't know if that's gonna be happening. I'm really leaning towards a decision there. I'm saying that this is going to full 12 rounds. I'd be shocked if it does that. What is kind of like get me though, right? I talked about the boxing odds, and if you hit the books and that type of stuff, the fan duels, the season sports books, and all that type of stuff. For this bout, Shakur Stevenson versus Teofimo Lopez, they got Shakur Stevenson at least a 3 or 3.5 to 1 favorite over Teofimo Lopez, and they got Lopez at plus 250. Now they were talking about it in the press conference a few weeks ago. Hey, and Teofimo Lopez is like, hey, okay, you want to keep betting on Shakur Stevenson? You could do that while my folks that support me, they'll be able to get some bills paid because I'm gonna win and then get some bills. Yeah, but that I'm actually kind of surprised at this though. Like, you're going to have Shakur Stevenson. That's going to be his first bout at the 140-pound division against Teofimo Lopez that, yes, is rated as the top fighter at the 140-pound division, but yet he is the underdog going up against Shakur Stevenson. That's going to be something right there. You know what I mean? But, you have the full card on the thing there, as I mentioned, Jermaine Ortiz, Keyshawn Davis. Keyshawn Davis is a 6.5 to 1 favorite. It's looking like they're over Jermaine Ortiz. You're going to have Bruce Carrington versus Carlos Castro there in the featherweight division, WBC featherweight title. You got Bruce Carrington as a significant favorite for that one. Actually, those are like the largest odds. There is that Carrington versus Castro fight. And you're going to have the WBC middleweight title fight there on this with Carlos Adames going up against Austin Ammo Williams. And Carlos Adames, of course, the defending champion, having the it's like a 4.5 to 1 odds there in favor of him going up against Ammo Williams. So that's mainly the card that's on slate for January 31st. So looking at that is some interesting bouts there on slate for that fight card. You know what I mean? That is the thing as far as like what we see coming up here for this month. You're gonna have some other fights that are on slate, for January 17th. You got January 30th. We got Pro Box over in the Washington D.C. area. So I'm gonna have more details on that because over the next couple of weeks I will be talking with a number of those fighters that are involved on that Pro Box card. So y'all look forward to that. Y'all, and remember, we do have the world title battle on January 24th between Raymond Moritaya and Andy Cruz. That's going to be at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. So we do have that. And you do also have Moses Atama going up against Jermaine Franklin on January 24th. So we got a number of good fights to look forward to here within these next few weeks. So y'all look into all of those fights, and as I said, I'm gonna keep track with what's going on with pro box, because that's gonna be one of the things that I'm gonna be focusing on. That's gonna be a very busy weekend at the end of the weekend. Friday, January 30th with the pro box, and then Saturday, January 31st with Ring 6. So that's what you have there on that front. All right. So, pretty much a quick one here for this edition of the Boxing Source podcast and everything like that. Y'all show your support. You know what I'm saying? Hit the like button, hit the share button. We're gonna see if we could have this in audio form here pretty soon. But other things I'm gonna be trying to do here for these next couple of weeks is one, you'll have it more of more streamlined here, because I'm going to see about having some lives that are going to be on TikTok, Instagram, all these other platforms live, right? And then the other thing here is, as I was mentioning a few days ago, try to have some more giveaways here for those who support the Boxing Source. All right, so I'm going to have that here planned for 2026, and like I said, we got a lot of action here for January. So Boxing fans, y'all stay tuned on that front. And so, with that being said, y'all, I will check y'all later. Peace out.